Daniel and Deke are with us, along with who? We did get these two down here. Who is this?
This is my daughter, Gabby.
Okay.
And my other daughter, Emily.
Gabby and Emily. And you two are going to be part of the big event coming up in Newton this Saturday and Sunday. It's the whatever annual?
12th
annual. Battle of Newton. Now, let's talk about that. The guys in the studio down here with me were talking about that earlier this morning. We'd mentioned that y'all were going to be here, and they said, well, is it really, was it a big battle or was it a small battle? And they were talking about in other places they have these reenactments, and a lot of times you embellish things just a little bit to make it interesting. The Battle of Newton wasn't what we would think of as a major battle in itself.
It wasn't a pitched battle at all. Basically what it was you had Yankee Raiders came up from Pensacola, where they were based at Fort Baracus, and they would come into the southern counties and they would take livestock, things of that nature, but they would also burn down the courthouses because it held the draft records.
Okay.
And there were conscription laws back then, and some of those guys that were riding with those Yankee Raiders didn't want to fight. So they wanted to do away with those records, and also that if they had served in the Confederate Army and deserted, they wanted to disassociate themselves. And in March of 1865, 1 month before the war ended, they rode into Newton and they were met by the Home Guard.
And the Home Guard was ready for them.
They were ready for them.
I mean, it's just like somebody let the cat out of the bag and they were ready.
Well, as we say from where I'm from up North Alabama, it was a bushwhack. Mm-hmm. They caught them coming into town and caught them in a crossfire and killed about 4 of them, and the rest of them skedaddled on out of there.
There's so much history. Newton at one time was the county seat. The courthouse was in Newton, correct?
It was.
That's correct.
It was in Daleville to start with, if I'm not mistaken.
It was in Newton, then it moved to Daleville, from Daleville to Ozark.
To Ozark, okay. There we go. And I did not know until recently. I was looking for some questions for trivia history of the Wiregrass about the Daleville courthouse situation. But talking about the history of Newton itself, it's hard for a lot of people to believe who may cross the Choctawhatchee River or go down to the Choctawhatchee River anywhere from Newton on south, that back in the day, and in the day would be during the war between the states up until the early 1900s, we actually had steamboat traffic on that river that carried a lot of commerce to the Gulf of Mexico and from the Gulf up to Newton, correct?
That is correct.
It's hard to believe when you can wade across that thing. It's silted in so much over the years, and it's hard to believe you can.
A lot of that comes from the cutting of the timber and clearing of the land for farming that went on after the war, and all that topsoil and whatnot washed into the river, and that's the reason why it's as shallow as it is now.
But you know, back in the summer, we went over there and actually saw some kids smaller than your daughters that were walking all the way across the river and weren't getting their knees wet. Yeah, and they could go from one side to the other. And then you sit there, you can see the bottom everywhere, and you think steamships came up this river and was a major part of moving commerce in this region.
And that was one reason why Newton was the county seat. Not only that it was in the center of the county, but that it was a center of commerce.
It was a center of commerce.
Another interesting fact about Newton was at one point in time, there was a board of doctors in Newton, and that's where doctors in the state of Alabama were actually sent to be certified to be physicians. Yes, sir, to be certified to be physicians.
Does that have anything to do with that old building over there that was?
It does. That old building you're speaking of is
was a college.
It was actually part of the college. It was a dormitory for the women of from my understanding, the Baptist Collegiate Institute.
There you go. There you go. There's a lot of history around a lot of these smaller communities that have, you know, kind of been shrinking up through the years. But the history and some of the old buildings around them, just unbelievable things that took place 100, 150 years ago in this area. Getting back to the Battle of Newton, y'all kind of rev things up a bit over there for the actual, what the reenactment that you do is not exactly what happened, but they're going to have the cannons over there this year?
Yes,
We're going to have four artillery pieces.
I remember the first year they did this, I was over there with a camera, and whoever was in charge of putting the powder in the cannon was very generous that year. I mean, it shook the earth for several miles around. So you get the feeling that you're at a battle when y'all do all this. And if you have not ever been to one of these, it's a great opportunity. John Hutto Park is kind of one of those well-kept secrets over there where you can go and picnic. I mean, enjoy the river, walk down along the river, boat ramp and stuff like that. But to see all this activity you guys and gals will be doing, you're going to have some of you camping over there?
A bunch of us.
There will be camps over there. Camps will open at 9 in the morning. They'll close at 1 in the afternoon, 30 minutes prior to the battle, and then, of course, after the battle, they'll open right back on up. But we're also going to do something a little different this year. We're going to have the Tallahassee String Band.
I saw that on
with,
the flyer, right.
With the Sons of Confederate Veterans Camp in Tallahassee that are actually going to come down and play some live music for us. And that will be after the battle following the the field hospital demonstration.
Now that's, I don't know who's going to be doing that, but the guy that last time I was there that did it, he gets real graphic with it.
That would be Mark Howard and Henry Howard. Both of them are natives of Enterprise, and they do an excellent job, and we're thankful that we have those guys come down each year. We really have a lot of fun with them. My daughter and my wife have both served in the and as nurses in the field hospital, and my son, who's now 8, the first event he ever did was Newton, and he carried bandages for the doc on the field.
Well, how did you two guys get interested in the reenactment? I'll go with you first.
Okay. I had an uncle who was in he was colonel of the 45th Virginia, and he needed a drummer boy for a movie shoot they were doing. And that movie shoot turned out to be Gettysburg.
Really?
And I started as a drummer boy. When I was 12, I transferred into mounted cavalry because it was a little closer to home, and then worked my way up through the ranks, and then moved down here, don't have a place to keep a horse, so I went back in the infantry.
Good deal. So you were in the movie?
I was.
What year was that?
91.
91. Just by accident you got in the movie.
Well, it wasn't. It was by design, I believe. I've always had a love of history, and my uncle knew that. My mama was one of 11 kids, and
Whoa.
we all have a love of history and on that side of the family, and it was instilled at me in an early age.
Okay, now how did you get all involved in it?
A lot of mine was just through research. Upon researching my ancestry, I learned that I had 4 family members that fought in 15th Alabama Company E. 15th Alabama Company E is also part of our reenacting unit. So just doing research, I figured if they can do it, why can't I?
Okay, have you two done extensive research on the Battle of Newton? I mean, there's not a lot to do, but
As
all
far
the
as
area.
we can, we have.
Okay, since we're getting close to Halloween, it'd only be fair that we bring up the other story that has to do with that over there. Huh?
Yep.
I mean, yeah, for
Know
those,
it know it so well.
yeah,
Yep.
well, for those who are real young, you don't hear it told as much as you used to, because once upon a time there were some of us as teenagers, and we're talking about in the 1970 to 75 time period, that was the place to go. You had to go see the hanging site of Bill Skeeto, who had connections with the Civil War time period, because he was supposedly hung because he had deserted the Confederate Army. True or false?
That's partially true.
I mean, that's one story.
It's one story. Really, the story came into its own with Catherine Wyndham Tucker's book, 13 Alabama Goes to Jeffrey, which came out in 1969. The story that I have been able to read, and I've actually, this past weekend, we were at the church where Bill Skeeto was buried to do a memorial service for Confederate soldiers, and also to award a service medal posthumously for a doctor from here in Dothan. I'm sorry I don't remember his name right off.
Dr. Tyson.
There you go. We were there to present a medal to his daughter for his service during the Second World War that was presented by the United Daughters of the Confederacy. the story, the one story goes is that he was a deserter, and he was passing information to the Yankee Raiders, and the Home Guard found it out. The other story is that his wife had gotten sick. He got word and paid for a replacement.
That's the story that I had been told.
Well, back then, if you owned
And the gossip was locally, when they saw him coming, there was a bunch of guys who may have had some adult beverage to go along with it, and they said, well, he's a deserter, and that's how the whole thing happened.
That would be the Home Guard that would have.
the area that that Bill Skeeto was hung in is in the same park as where we hold the event. And typically at night, on Saturday night, we'll tell the story, and we typically, what kids are in camp, we'll take them down there by lantern light, and we'll see if we can't find the hole. So we have a lot of fun with it.
The hole is actually
Under the bridge.
under the bridge now. I mean,
It's under the second tier of the bridge, covered
Okay.
with pillar and rocks.
That's right. But it used to be marked. There used to be, you'd walk from the old bridge over, you'd actually walk north to that location, and there were 4 concrete posts that marked the site years ago. You guys are too young to even probably remember that, but there was 4 concrete posts with the cable around it to mark the hole, and the hole was there. And I don't know who did the work for them, but you could fill up that hole at night before you camped out there with a bunch of trash and wake up the next morning to be cleaned out again. You don't believe that, do you?
I don't know, I've seen many strange things in my life.
But the Bill Skeeto story is part of the battle. I mean, it's part of the history of Newton, and Bill Skeeto was actually a Methodist
circuit rider.
circuit rider.
Back then they had more churches and they had preachers, and so this preacher might be at this church this Sunday, next Sunday he might be at a different church, but he was a circuit rider.
Okay. We're going to talk about more of what you folks will be doing over there. This is a free event, correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
F-R-E-E. That's
Can't get no better than that in
can't
this
get
economy.
no better. Not in today's economy. You can't get any better than that. And each day, let me mention this, we'll talk about the full schedule of events, but if you're interested in seeing the battle reenactment, they're going to do that Saturday and Sunday at 1:30 each afternoon. So
That's correct.
kind of give you, and then there's a lot of other things that go along with it, and we're going to talk more with Daniel, Zeke, and Gene Watson has made it over our way. We're going to talk with her in just a few minutes. Whole lot happening this weekend in Newton, Alabama, Highway 134, and it's in the John Hutto Park. We'll tell you all about it right after the break. Stay with us. It's Gene Watson. Good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
And Doc Zeigler, Charles Zeigler, back over here, our historian, correct?
Somewhat.
Somewhat. Well, now, he was a historian a while ago. He's backed off a little bit now.
Jack of all trades, master of none.
We got a discussion going, and Bob Moorhead up in Skipperville called in. He claims to be, and believe it or not, Bob, Gene kind of backed up your story, that you are a descendant of Bill Skeeto. And remember, Gene and I do because of our ages, and Charles too, but these younger crowd don't remember when we used to go, and that was, you know, a lot of it was not too long after the 13 Ghost Stories of Alabama came out. It's when the site became real popular down there, correct?
There's still a lot of calls about
I
the
can
site.
imagine, because you get kids getting into school systems that see those stories, but the thing was actually marked with 4 concrete posts, and it had a cable that ran through those posts, correct?
Right, and a bronze plaque.
And a bronze plaque, and that plaque is where?
It's in the museum that's on top of Town Hall and the library, and it is all bent, and where the water bent the bronze plaque.
And that would have been, historian, which flood that did that?
I understand it was flood of 1990.
Okay. So
Now,
it was,
I actually have a picture of that area with the 4 concrete posts and the cables around it.
Now, the concrete post and the cable marking the site where he was allegedly, where the hanging took place, is now covered with rocks by the new bridge.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
An older gentleman who is no longer with us took me down there and showed me the spot. And what was interesting about that, all this riprap, I think is what they call it under the bridge, but
Right.
it was all clean except that place he showed me, and it was full of dirt.
Oh my goodness, here we go again. This is all part of the history of the Wiregrass area. We were talking before you folks arrived about the history of Newton, the fact that there was a college there once upon a time.
Yes, the Baptist Collegiate Institute.
See, she knew exactly. You were correct. You were right. And the part that still stands was the dormitory, is that correct?
That was a girls' dormitory. Everything else is gone except that dormitory. And it was built in around 1920.
And Gene, at one time we were talking about Newton was the county seat
Yes.
because of its central location in the county, A, and B, the river.
Yes. River traffic.
So, go back to Charles just a minute. This may come back as a question for you later on a test. Till what period of time did we have commercial traffic on that river?
It was up to the late 1800s.
Okay.
From what I've read, I think we go up in the 1890s, but it began to decrease.
I can remember seeing some pictures that were actually photographs that were actually made in the 1800s, and it was the old steamboat, and it was supposedly at the dock in Newton. But back then, those boats didn't draft but about, what, 3 feet of water
Right.
loaded, right?
Right, yeah.
That's amazing. And they came up, and of course there were certain times of the year where they couldn't run the river, right?
That's correct.
But for the most part, most of the year they, unless it was a real big drought situation, they could run all the way to Newton.
Now, something a lot of folks don't know, and I can document this, as late as the 1960s, there was still a push to dredge that river and put a landing up in Newton.
Really?
It was. And they were still, as late as the 1960s, still trying to put an electro dam down there where, in the John Hutto Park area, to be a dam similar to Columbia.
Okay. Now, they did have City of Dothan abandon this deal, and I've never gotten the correct or the truth of the matter as to why they did, but well south of you, around 167 highway between Hartford and Enterprise, they actually started construction of the earthern part of the dam, and we're going to build a lake down there, hydroelectric power for the City of Dothan. And then I forgot what year they just quit. You remember that?
I don't remember that one.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know
And
south of Dothan, we've got the old Killebrew mill that's still there, that produced electricity, and there was some talk about backing that up. But then there were some words about the new 4-lane coming up that would have an impact with the water supply, and
They killed that off.
Katie barred the door. on
That's
that one.
it. Gene, talk a little bit about all the different events in Newton coming up this weekend. We've talked a little bit about the battles are going to be at 1:30 each day, and this is kind of the showcase day for the community of Newton, correct?
yes, it is. It needs, the more support we have, the better things are. It's actually the history of Newton. There was not a big battle. It was only a skirmish.
Skirmish.
But I think it's wonderful that we can commemorate this because it is part of history. But the gates will open about 9 o'clock. People can tour the camps that are set up, which are authentic period camps with their tents and the cooking over the fire and the different things like that. Then there will be the battle, and we're going to have a doctor's demonstration, and there's going to be games for the kids, making crafts and things like that. And then after the battle, we will have, I believe it's the Tallahassee String Quartet or something, string
band.
Tallahassee string band that is going to perform authentic period music for us there for a while until the gates close at 5.
Okay. So a lot of things going on, and it's free to the public now. There'll be some vendors there with food, I'm
Right.
sure.
And then Sunday, we would like to invite everybody. At 10:30 Sunday morning, we have a church service underneath the tent out in the field. And it will be conducted by the Reverend Joe Moore, who is pastor of the Newton United Methodist Church. And any of our offerings that day will go to the non-denominational food bank that is taken care of by the Methodist Church there in Newton. And so it helps the community.
It does. We're going to talk about John Hutto Park. More from our reenactors here, Deke and Daniel, and movie star here. Just back into a major motion picture. But there's a lot of history all across the southern United States on different battles. They call them battles, but in the case of Newton, we call it the Battle of Newton. It was a skirmish of Newton. And I want to get you guys, since y'all have done a lot of research on this, to tell what are the closest battles or skirmishes to Newton that might have taken place. So some other local interest during the Civil War time period. More from Gene, more from Charles. It's a big weekend up in Newton. It's absolutely free admission. John Hutto Park, located on Highway 134, just right off 134. You can't miss it. It's right at the end of the river bridge, and it is something you'll enjoy. Take the kids, the grandkids, load everybody up. 2 different reenactments of the battle, and that'll be at 1:30 both Saturday and Sunday. More on the big event in Newton right after this. Stay with us. We're having some great conversations during the breaks here. You got Bob Moorhead, who is up there in Skipperville. Get him to tell you about the guys that buried all the gold, and they got in a fight, and one of them killed the other one over the gold. And the historian Bob says that's not true. But going back to what we said a little bit, we made a disclaimer at the very beginning of the show when we started talking about the Battle of Newton. It was a skirmish. It wasn't a battle, but my gosh, you can't have any good reenactments without a cannon going off, so they add the cannons and everything to it, right? So there's a little bit of embellishing to this whole story, and I think, Moorhead, you need to just, it'd be like not having a Christmas here, but I don't think what you heard was true. And Gene's sitting over here said, we had people through the years that have come to Newton with metal detectors looking for the buried treasure.
That's correct.
Probably after the internet got started too, wasn't it?
Well, there was an article in a Treasure Hunters magazine
Oh,
or something like that, and everybody, people started coming and wanting to dig on the properties of different people to.
Kind of like those infomercials about the gold rushes and everything. Everybody buys all this equipment to go looking for gold, right? Mm-hmm. All right, trying to sell you something, all right? But you've actually had people show up looking for the treasure.
We've had members of the 15th Alabama scoured that entire park with their metal detectors.
Looking for the buried treasure.
Yeah.
Okay, and so far no one has found any buried treasure, right?
I ain't telling where it's at.
My gosh, there was the flood of 90, the flood of 94, the flood of 98, and that's just in our lifetime, it's 70-something. You've had so many floods up there, unless they buried it real deep way back when. It's probably down around Clayhatchie Boat Landing right now. I think if you go down there with a metal detector, you'll find it, Charles. What do you think?
Well, understand, Newton is where it's at because Newton is on a hill. The river is downhill.
This is true. You can't argue with that.
But I can't tell you everything I know about the gold.
buried treasure.
Because if I did, y'all would quit coming and looking, and we need y'all to come to town.
Come do business. And Charles has just opened up a pick and shovel shop right there at the entrance to John Hutto Park, I think, and metal detectors. This is going to be a lot of fun. Folks that have seen it before will want to come back, and folks who have never seen this reenactment will want to see it. Back to our two, to Deke and Daniel. Other skirmishes or battles, closest ones to Newton that you researched were where?
Fairview, which would be in Coffee County.
Okay.
That was also another skirmish took place late in the war. You had raiders that had come up and had burnt the courthouse at Elba. The home guard got a little sore about it and got after them and caught them south of Elba before they're on the highway before you get to Sampson. They're around Fairview Church, and that little area there is known as Battle Branch. And they scattered towards raiders and captured 2 of them.
Fairview is pretty much west, a little southwest of Enterprise.
It is.
It's in the southernmost part of Coffee County, pretty much.
I'd say southwest central.
Okay, southwest central, all right.
But they caught 2 of the raiders, and matter of fact, one of them was shot trying to escape. The sheriff of Coffee County, Mr. Brooks, was actually killed in that fight, as well as 4 other members of the home guard. And they took them back to Elba. One of them tried to escape. They shot him, and they hung the other one.
Okay.
Other than that, Mariana comes to mind. Mariana was a whole lot bigger than Newton or Fairview would have been, because it involved actual fighting in the town itself. There were several members of the guard there killed, and the Yankees were up, of course, like I said before, stealing. What do Yankees do best? No offense to the Yankees out there, but,
yeah, but
you know.
I went to, used to go do a lot of bass tournaments for different companies a few years back, and one of the towns we went to on a regular basis was Milledgeville, Georgia, which is rich in history. And reading some of the documentation there, the Yankees were a nasty bunch of folks. When you start putting molasses and sorghum syrup in the pipes of the organ at the churches,
That's just mean.
that's just
That's just meaning. God don't like ugly.
no, that's about as low as you can get. Talk about the fatalities, though, Charles, the historian. Talk about the skirmish of Newton. How many lives were lost?
3
And they were all?
from on the Raiders side.
Okay.
None of the townsmen were killed or shot.
So the home guard was ready and waiting, pretty much.
Yes. Now, understand that there were 3 factions there. You had the military home guard, which was camped on the courthouse square.
Okay.
Then you had one group of men, citizens, that were being put together by Daniel Carmichael. And then they kind of split off, and you had one group on either side of the road, some behind the hotel, some behind the buildings. And when the raiders came walking in, they did not ride their horses in. When they came walking in, they were ambushed. And then from there, we have a couple of different accounts.
Well, if they didn't ride, I know why I know how they got the jump on them. If those boys weren't riding horses and climbed that hill from the river up to downtown Newton, they would give out.
They did not. They didn't come from that direction.
Which way did they come?
came from Pinker Bray, and
Okay.
it was flat. And the letter in the Montgomery Mail newspaper said that they tied their horses at the edge of town and walked in.
Very good. You said you have documentation of how many different bridges over the Choctawhatchee River?
I can document 5.
5.
I can't tell you exactly where they were, but I can show you where I think 3 are.
Well, we know where Current and the old 134 bridge
Right.
is.
And
Where
then
would the other ones have been?
just upstream from the new bridge,
Waterford up that way?
well, I'd say probably 50 yards.
Oh, okay.
If you walk up there, and it's on private land, so you need to get permission, there is a weather station, a weather tower. You got one on each of the bridges that we know now.
Exactly.
So I'm thinking if that is true, if that weather tower holds true to the other bridges, then that may have been where the old iron bridge was.
Okay. And it would make sense a little bit upstream instead of downstream because the grade of the hill is a little higher down than it is up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Got to take a break. More from our guest as Top of the Morning continues. The battle, skirmish, whatever you want to call it, being reenacted this weekend in Newton at Saturday and Sunday. And we'll give you one more rundown of all the events taking place associated with that right after the break. Stay with us. I'm going to quote Geraldine on this. A lie don't care who tells it. Agreed, Charles? I think
we'll all agree on that.
yeah, but we disappoint people sometimes when we find out that stories we've heard all of our lives are not true. And the deal about the buried gold and somebody getting killed over the buried gold might have been one of those we need a story to tell type deals. Is that what you're saying?
I would say so.
Okay. Sorry, Bob. Now, Danny Ellison and the crew up in Headland. They're a little disappointed there are no boys in gray down here this morning, Confederate soldiers, and they're on their way down here
Well,
with
tell 'em-
high-powered deer rifles.
tell them to
and they-
save their gas because not all Confederate soldiers wore gray. That's a misnomer.
All right.
All right, if you notice the jacket I'm wearing is butternut because they did not have dyes. They would have to use hickory nuts and different types of extracts to dye their clothing. Not only that, Confederate soldiers used what they could find because of the blockade and there wasn't a lot of industry down here. It wasn't uncommon to pick up a hat off the battlefield or to pick up a pair of pants or take your shoes off of the prisoner you just captured or the man you just shot.
So it was more about which side of the battlefield you were on and
What flag you were under.
what flag you were under.
One of the most interesting incidences that happened in the war was during the battle at First Manassas. Yankees call it Bull Run. It ain't Bull Run, it's Manassas.
All right.
There was a regiment of Virginia infantry that marched up on a Federal artillery position, and the Federals began to swing their guns, and their commander hollered and said, don't fire, those are Union men. And they got within about 50 yards of them and leveled a volley into them and just decimated that artillery battery, and it was Virginia troops. Stonewall Jackson wore his old Mexican War uniform for a good part of the war until he was actually presented with the famous gray uniform we see pictures of him wearing by General Jeb Stuart. So don't think that just because somebody was wearing a little bit of blue like I am that they wasn't Confederate.
They could have very well been Confederate, right?
Very much so.
All right, rundown before we run out of time, because we're going to get a weather in here before we get out of here. The full run of events. It's going to be Saturday and Sunday. The gates open at what time?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
All right. And they gave Gene, you got something, I've got that same thing. I thought you had something new over there.
No, we're going to have some games for the kids.
Right.
The camps, the authentic camps will be open for visitation, and some of the reenactors will be there explaining it. We are going to have a ladies' tea that I forgot about. We'll have the battle, and then we'll have the Tallahassee Army Guard String Band about 3 o'clock after the battle.
That'll be Saturday.
That will be Saturday.
Okay.
Sunday morning, we will have church services at 10:30. Please bring your chairs. We do not have any seating facilities at the park. You need to bring your chairs or a blanket or something to sit on. We do have food vendors. We have sutlers, which are people who sell period stuff. What did I forget, guys?
The leathercraft, I think, Indian artifact.
Yes, and we're also had McGowan Knife Company donate us a handmade knife that we're selling tickets for.
That long.
It's a big, beautiful knife.
Okay.
And it's handmade out of a rasp.
Well, very good.
And that will be given away Sunday afternoon after the battle.
There'll be something for the whole family to enjoy, mainly the history and the fellowship, but I think we need to have a debate with Charles and Moorhead on the deal with the gold. But now, a lot of times you hear these stories and you hear them over and over again, and you find out that it wasn't really like you thought it was. But and there's a lot of, like I said, this reenactment of the Battle of Newton, as we talked about earlier. with Deke and Daniel, it's going to be a little revved up over what the actual skirmish was, because in a skirmish with about 5 folks coming into town, you wouldn't have fired a bunch of cannons off, would you?
I don't reckon so. You better save that powder.
Save that powder.
Charles, I would like to thank everyone who has helped us put this on this year. Charles and I are, I guess we call ourselves the Newton Home Guard, but the girls, yeah, the girls, I'm allowed in, don't know why. But the SCV, the Sons of the Confederate Veterans, are really, out of Enterprise, are really helping us, and the Daughters of the United Confederacy are helping us. The Ruatan is feeding the reenactors on Saturday night. The town of Newton is supplying us the place as well as a little financial assistance. And we just, you know, we appreciate all the help we got. We would like to have more help, more people interested, and let's make this a community affair.
How many actors will you have, reenactors?
It's hard to tell. We've put out to reenactors all over Georgia, Florida, and Alabama. We've even contacted some as far away as Tennessee, but the bad thing about it is it's the same weekend as one of the sesquicentennial events, which will be Vicksburg.
Oh, okay.
And that's also this weekend. But don't drive to Vicksburg. Y'all come to Newton.
Save a lot of gas. Just come to Newton. It's
Free
you know,
admission.
Free admission too. And I would imagine you're going to have some of the folks that just because of what I mentioned, because of the price of fuel right now, that might not go to Vicksburg, might stay a little closer to home.
I've talked to several reenactors that were planning on going to Vicksburg initially, and then they decided otherwise when they saw how high gas was going.
And you have had how many there at one time through all the years? I know some of the first times I went up there, first few years, there was a crowd of y'all up there.
I think we've put over 100 soldiers on the field.
That's what I was going to say, close to 100 at one time. Thank y'all for getting up and being with us, Gene.
Mr. Platt, if anybody has any questions, would like more information on the event or a rundown of the schedules or what vendors are going to be there, they can go to www.battleofnewton.org.
Okay.
That has all of our information and all of the sponsoring entities that Miss Jean was mentioning, and a few others that have been helping us out.
Didn't know you had a website. The website again?
www.battleofnewton.org.
.org.
One word, Battle of Newton.
Okay. Thank y'all. Good to
Okay.
see you.
Thanks, Charlie.
And
We
get up
appreciate
there-
it.
Get up there this weekend. It is a free event, and there'll be vendors there with food. You can enjoy the whole day there at John Hutto Park. Beautiful facilities, just kind of laid back atmosphere right on the banks of the Choctawhatchee River.